Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears to some of the travails that take place throughout our cities, states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And I try to get you to utilize your five senses that God has given us and your gut instinct. So I got one coming straight out of LA, and this is a story where you need to really pay attention to your neighbors, who you think you know, who you don't know, and sometimes people are out to get you and have diabolical ideations about taking advantage of individuals. Here we go. LA woman steals millions in real estate assets in fraud scheme that involve disposing man's body. A West Hills woman who authorities say acted greedy and grotesque was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for a bizarre crime that involved identity theft, forgery, and disposing the body of a man and making it look like he was still alive. Yes, indeed. According to the Justice Department, Caroline Joanne Herling, 44, was sentenced to 240 months in federal prison for fraudulently obtaining ownership of real estate and money through identity theft and forged power of attorney forms. Authorities said it was a nearly $3.9 million scheme. This defendant's misconduct was both greedy and grotesque, causing profound pain to the victims and their loved ones, said U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada. There must be serious consequences for those who prey on vulnerable communities, such as older adults, and my office will remain steadfast in bringing these offenders to justice. How did she prey on vulnerable homeowners? According to court documents, Herling, who also went by Carrie Phoenix, would look for properties in affluent neighborhoods that appeared unkept. She and her co-conspirators would visit nice neighborhoods to search for things like algae-filled pools or homes with overgrown shrubs to ultimately track down people who were unable to care for their properties. In 2020, they found a home in Sherman Oaks. After finding such a home, Herling and her co-conspirators broke into the residence where an elderly victim resided, said the Justice Department in a statement. Sometime in September 2020, that man, identified as Charles Wilding, died. Now remember that name, Charles Wilding. Investigators aren't sure how he died, but believe Miss Herling and others took over the property while his body decomposed in his home. Rather than reporting his death, Miss Herling and others in the conspiracy left his body in his house while they looted his assets, said the Justice Department. Authorities said Herling used a forged power of attorney form so she could pretend to act on Wilding's behalf while stealing his real estate and financial accounts. Police began a missing person investigation into Wilding. And it goes like this. In October 2021, law enforcement launched an investigation when neighbors reported Wilding missing. According to the complaint, an anonymous caller gave detectives a tip, saying unidentified individuals are utilizing his identity for financial gain. Court documents said Ms. Herling identified herself to police as a close friend of Mr. Wilding and his family. She was also listed as the trustee of his family trust, which according to the DOJ purportedly had been created by the victim's mother, who died in June 2017. That's Mr. Wilding's mother. However, that was actually forged. She told police Wilding had moved to Carpintera. She stated that Wilding was not home and was staying with friends in the city of Carpintera while she was working to get the house back in order, as it was in disarray and contained black mold. Miss Herling obtained new phones, paid men to pretend to be Mr. Wilding. According to authorities, after Miss Hurling found out about the police investigation into Mr. Wilding's whereabouts, she executed an elaborate scheme to ensure his body would never be found and his death would remain unreported. According to the complaint, Miss Hurling got a new phone and paid a man to use it so that he could pretend to be Mr. Wilding. This, too, support the idea that the victim agreed to distribute his assets to Miss Hurling and her associates. Now they moved Mr. Wilding's body across California. The DOJ said Miss Hurling and her conspirators moved Mr. Wilding's body to her apartment in West Los Angeles, where they tried to dispose of it. When that didn't work, authorities said they dismembered the body, placed the pieces in vacuum-sealed bags, and moved it all over the Bay Area. Another member of the conspiracy who owned a sailboat assisted in disposing of the mutilated remains of the deceased victim into San Francisco Bay, the investigation revealed. Investigators said Mr. Wilding's remains were never found. During Friday's sentencing hearing, U.S. District Judge Mami Iwusi Mensa Frimpong said Wilding was a man and a human being, but Miss Hurling did not see that and instead treated him like a cash register. More forged documents. Wilding was the listed executor and beneficiary to the will of another victim, but that document was another forgery that Miss Hurling claimed to have discovered in a safe deposit box rented by the deceased victim's mother. Based on this forged will, the missing victim was to inherit an estate worth more than $1.7 million, assets that ultimately fell under Miss Hurling's control as a trustee of his estate, said the Justice Department. Then there was a third victim had home sold without his consent. Authorities said Miss Hurling also defrauded a third victim and sold his house without his consent by using a conspirator with fake identity documents to pose as the victim. Hurling set up accounts to get the money from the sale, which approximately was $1.5 million. According to the documents, this third victim, who was already suffering from mental health issues, took his own life after losing his home. Miss Hurling later used that money to buy a house in West Hills. The DOJ said the total loss in these cases was $3,887,051. During the investigation, law enforcement searched Miss Hurling's property and found several guns, fake police badges, and documents showing evidence of fraud and forgeries, including notes where Miss Hurling was practicing signing the names of her victims. Now, Miss Hurling pleads guilty. Hurling pleads guilty in March 2023 to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The 44-year-old has been in federal custody since January 2023. One of Hurling's accomplices, identified as 50-year-old Matthew Jason Croft of Tarzana, pleaded guilty in October 2023 to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and one count of possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine. He faces up to 20 years in federal prison for wire fraud and up to 40 years for meth trafficking when he's sentenced in June. Neighbors were left shocked. Coco Mary lives across the street from Mr. Wilding's home in Sherman Oaks with her elderly mother. To be preying on older, fragile people is the same thing to me as preying on animals, innocent children, she said. Hurling needs to be behind bars. Neighbors told Eyewitness News Wilding was a recluse with very little family and often looked disheveled. Happening right underneath our noses and no one knew, and that worries me about living in the city of LA, said Mary. But why is it that none of us knew what was going on there? Get to know your neighbors. Hurling was ordered to pay $3.8 million in restitution. What an unbelievable story how this young lady, Miss Hurling, took advantage of several people. Even there were deaths involved in this. She needs to be under the jail. Tell me what you think of this story.